Your Authentic Self is a podcast designed to guide you towards a deeper, more rewarding life by nurturing your emotional, mental, physical and spiritual well-being. We're thrilled to take you on this journey. Welcome to today's episode.
Welcome to another episode of the Your Authentic Self podcast. Today we're looking at emotional connection and vulnerability, following on from the themes in the previous episode. So you might be thinking, why do I need to know about emotional connection? Well, I like to think of us all as being made up of at least 4 parts, so mind, body, soul and emotion. And I think us as human beings have at least those 4 parts of us that we need to pay attention to. But I'd be pretty certain to put money on the fact that most of us are more familiar with our minds. Our minds are very dominant. They tend to kind of rule the show, really. They kind of present all kinds of ideas and fears and worries and fantasies to us pretty much every waking moment of the day, and even in our dreams sometimes. But the part that can often get neglected or overlooked is the emotional part of ourselves. So in this episode, we want to just spend a little bit of time talking about emotional connection and its link to vulnerability. And hopefully you'll find something in this that's useful and perhaps just make connecting to your emotion a little bit less daunting. If I sum that up all right, Lee, is that the plan for this episode?
I think that was quite full.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add at that point? I suppose thinking to start off with, what do we mean by emotional connection?
Well, I think we started touching on the last episode, really. Emotional connection is being in tune with ourselves emotionally. And when I say emotional, from an emotional, vulnerable point of view. Because the thing is with, and reconnecting back to that, because we're all born with emotion.
Yes.
You know, but for many reasons that we can start disconnecting from it, because for the rest of our life, even now we're going to feel happy, joy, you know, excitement, but we're also going to feel disappointment, loss, lonely, embarrassed.
Yeah.
We can't stop
all of them.
They're all going to be there at some point, and they're going to come in waves.
Yeah.
So it's very important to be able to have a healthy relationship and actually connect with them and be with them. Absolutely.
I think your list of all the different, and there's more of course, but all those different emotions you listed there, I think it's important to kind of see them all as they just are. They're not positive or negative.
Yeah.
They're not good or bad. You know, because in popular psychology, there's often this idea of there being positive emotion and negative emotion, isn't there?
Yeah.
But I think we agree that they just are. They're not good or bad. They just are.
They're just natural.
Yeah.
And I totally agree with you. That, but this is only from my point of view. I don't like the connotation of, more negative emotion or more positive emotion, because you're trying to separate one. Well, no, feel the positive. Don't feel the negative when we're going to feel them all. So just to start seeing them as just natural.
Absolutely. And I think positive psychology kind of means well, but it can actually cause as many problems as it tries to solve, because if I'm kind of looking into positive psychology, reading stuff or seeing posts on Facebook, it's going to encourage me to be happy, to think positive, to think successful. But what if I'm not feeling that in that day? What if somebody I really care about has just died and I'm feeling really sad? It's going to be quite hard to get to feel positive and optimistic, isn't it? So maybe I just need to be with my sadness today. Maybe that's all right.
And that's okay.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, but it's like you're saying, there's this big thing now of toxic positivity, and it isn't good and it isn't healthy, and it's not real.
No.
And it's not being your authentic self.
It isn't. Absolutely not.
And go back to the wording that you used just now, and when I'm working with people as well, and I said, well, how do you feel about that? And they said, well, I feel bad, or I don't feel good. Well, if you think an emotion is bad or not good, why would you want to go anywhere near it?
Exactly, yeah.
So it's about dropping the labels of negative, positive, good, bad. And actually, no, this is just how it is. This is just how you are. Just how it's just natural.
Absolutely. So we're painting a picture here, aren't we, where what we're saying is emotion, it is all okay. Whatever the emotion is, it's okay. It's natural, it's human, it's okay. So some are more pleasant to feel than others, but they're all okay.
And they're okay. And they'll all pass.
Yes.
It's like, I speak to people and say, have you ever felt joy and excitement before? Yes. And did that pass and did that go? Yes. Just learning that if you feel disappointed or sad at some point, that will pass too. It won't stay forever.
Someone wise said this too will pass.
Yeah,
I can't remember who it was. No, somebody clever said that, didn't they?
Yeah.
So the title of this episode is Emotional Connection. So it kind of suggests, doesn't it, that we think that we disconnect from emotion.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe we should think about that.
Yeah. Well, for myself, I'd go into about disconnection. If we have a difficult childhood, we'll separate from ourselves because we need to manage our environment, and but in turn, then we lose who we truly are.
Yeah.
Because if we've got to put all our energy in our surviving our environment, we're going to lose who we truly are.
Yeah.
So that goes back to, and then we need to start to adapting, because if we're in an environment that on a daily or weekly, or let's just say a regular basis, that we're feeling some vulnerability, we're feeling anxious, scared, powerless, lonely, isolated from a young age, we don't understand how we can self-soothe that or emotionally regulate that, or even on a mind level actually understand it. So we're talking about the emotion at the minute, but we'll disconnect from that, because we can't, as children or young people, feel that pain or vulnerability all the time.
No.
So we need to come away from it.
Absolutely.
And to survive it. So then we adapt different behaviours around that.
And then there's messages, isn't there, from parents, caregivers, society, schools, everywhere really, that kind of says it's not okay to be emotional. So you take a very simple thing of, a little child falls over and somebody says, come on, don't be silly. If they're upset and they're crying because it hurt, don't be silly, come on, or be brave. There's all these kind of messages communicated innocently sometimes, aren't they? With good intent, but actually that message that goes to that child is like, oh, okay, so I'm hurting, but it's not okay to hurt. It's not okay to feel upset. And then where does that feeling go? I mean, there's nowhere else for it to go but to be suppressed, to push it down somehow, isn't it?
And it's true what you're saying. I'm talking on one aspect of having a difficult childhood, but also, as you're saying, it can just be messages. It can just be belief systems that we I work with sometimes that don't show your emotions because it's weak.
Yes.
But actually, if you look at it the other way, for many years, if you learn that and you're doing that actually, and you don't connect with your emotion or be your emotion, actually what you're doing is you're coming away, you're running away from your emotion because you don't want to feel. Because it takes real courage and strength to actually feel and actually be with it. So you can turn that as actually, where's the real strength and where's the real weakness? Running away from actually how you're feeling, or actually to be with actually
stay with it. But this I think we need to almost like relearn, because I think it's probably safe to say that the majority of us had to disconnect from our emotion early in life to survive early life. Growing up in the 70s, the classic one was, if you were crying or whatever, it was like, stop crying, I'll give you something to cry for. These
or connotations.
These powerful messages that were put out, which actually left children with no option but to suppress, deny, disconnect from their emotional experience. Because basically what the world was saying to us was, it's not okay to be emotional. Well, unless it's happy emotion. That's okay, but anything else is not okay.
Unless you're good.
Yes.
Unless you're quiet. Unless you're happy, enjoy it. And getting back to the connotation, as long as it's positive.
Yes, that's fine.
That's fine.
And I think, as a world, probably, we say this every episode, but that's the theme for another episode. The world needs to adjust to kind of stop this damage being done. But we're living with this legacy, aren't we, for generation after generation, where it's not okay to be anything other than happy. In terms of emotion. Anything else has to be disconnected from, because it's not acceptable.
But it's not realistic.
Well, it's not.
It's not realistic.
It's actually impossible, and it's very damaging. Because if as a young person we're basically told basically you cannot be angry, upset, hurt, any of those things, have to disconnect from it. But to disconnect from emotion takes a lot of doing, doesn't it? Because it is natural to be connected to emotion. So we have to find some ways of disconnecting, don't we? So first of all, we might start with pushing it down, swallowing down those tears, repressing it somehow, taking a deep breath. But eventually, that emotion is going to be persistent. It's going to keep trying to come out, isn't it? Because that is the natural way. So as we get older, we're going to have to be more and more creative about the things that we do to disconnect from emotion, which of course is the root of addiction. So we might take to drinking or drugs or sex or food or whatever it is to try and stay disconnected from those emotions that are a bit painful.
That's right. And you take that back from adulthood, because when we're and we lead up to the addiction and stuff, because it's just a form of escapism from the pain, and we haven't been supported and helped to actually just to normalise or regulate that. So even from a young age, as you're saying, we need to like I was saying earlier, if we're feeling pain and vulnerability all the time, we need to adapt our behaviour and need to adapt our environment. So as a child, I know some people can get aggressive and stop and have fights. Some children may just withdraw and become more quiet.
Yeah.
There's some people that like fires.
Yeah.
Some people run away from home. Some people climb trees.
Yeah.
Some people, especially in the modern day, just go on gaming,
Yeah.
Xbox and PlayStations, because it just tunnels them out.
Yeah.
Anything to get away from what they're feeling,
yeah.
because of the pain, and they're not learning how to actually regulate that. And that leads on to, because when we were 8 years old or 7 years old, we didn't have a drug dealer. At 10 years old, 11 years old, you couldn't get served in a pub.
No.
So all those forms of escapism from when you're younger, that's what just led on then to, it's just another form of escapism.
Yeah.
Because I think there's this thing of, when I'm working with people, it's not, don't look at the addiction, you look at the pain.
Absolutely.
You look at the vulnerability.
Yeah. I think it's Gavel Mate, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
the kind of the modern guru in
That's
terms of
right.
addiction and trauma.
Yeah.
But he basically says it's all trauma.
Yeah, all
the root of
trauma.
any addiction is trauma. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like all therapeutic approaches anyway. They they've got their own way of looking at it and understanding it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we disconnect, as is often the case with these things that eventually don't serve us so well. We disconnect to survive the environment we grow up in. We disconnect from our emotions because basically we receive messages from wherever they come from that it's not okay to be anything other than okay.
Yeah.
Basically, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we have to get very creative around how we're going to, first of all, create the disconnect from our emotion, and then how we sustain that disconnect. Because, of course, the risk then is as soon as we start to feel something that's other than okay, then we're going to be judged or shamed or rejected or whatever,
Which is interesting, because whatever is okay, but that's not our okay.
Yes.
That's someone else's
of
okay.
course.
So even within ourselves, how we're acting is still not feeling okay.
Absolutely.
And it goes back, we're not actually being our authentic self.
Yeah, absolutely. And it causes, I think, illness, really.
Yeah.
I've seen it so often, both in my personal life and in people I work with. Continued disconnection from emotion causes, I think, sometimes physical illness. Not to mention psychological distress and illness. And again, we touched on it a little bit in the last episode, but it can also damage relationships. How on earth can you have an authentic relationship with someone as an adult if you can't know how you feel and communicate that feeling? It's very difficult.
Well, that's what happens, because when we talk about adaptive behaviour, we need to adapt our behaviour from when we're younger. And the thing is then, so when we're in difficulty, we get these coping mechanisms, but unfortunately then, if we haven't understood, explored that, or learnt new coping mechanisms, we just use those coping mechanisms in our relationships. And we go back to that's then not serving us, because then it's creating discord in our relationships, because of how we're trying to disconnect from ourselves, but also disconnect from the other person.
Absolutely.
But in that time, then we could get more aggressive around that, or we just withdraw from the relationship, which is not helping our relationship or ourselves.
Absolutely. Sometimes in relationships, I've heard people say, like my partner, they just they don't feel anything. They're emotionally illiterate, and these derogatory kind of comments are used, aren't they, to kind of almost like blame somebody for not being able to feel something or communicate that. But I think we have to recognise that sometimes that isn't a lifestyle choice, is it? That person has almost had to do that to survive difficult environments, whether we're talking about abuse or whether we're talking about somebody who fell over and was kind of given the message it's not okay to be upset about that. So, on a very minor level or a very severe level, people had to stop feeling in order to survive the environment.
In difficult moments, because that's the thing, is that we need to, which is going to be more support for ourselves and our relationships in our moments of difficulty, to stay connected to the emotion. Because some people say to me, but when everything's good, there's no problem. But then again, why would there be a problem if everything's good?
Everything's all right.
It's about actually how can you stay connected when you're in difficality, and just stay with the emotion and be able to communicate from that space.
Hard, isn't it?
Very
hard. Yeah. I'm trying to think back to when I first kind of disconnected from emotion, and I think it was very young, actually. I'm thinking back to almost like 4 or 5 years old and having to almost like I noticed what I felt, quite young really, isn't it? But I did notice what I felt, but kind of the message I was giving myself was, okay, but don't go with that, don't feel that, be with the others. I mentioned in a previous episode how I kind of became almost like carer for my mum, not because of disability or anything, but because of mental health problems. And so it was almost like what I feel doesn't matter. What matters is that I look after her. It's almost like that 4 or 5 years old, really starting to disconnect from my emotion in order to be there to care for somebody else and their emotion. So it was quite young. I don't know if you've got a similar memory.
Yeah, I think from my memories really is probably the same as you really, thinking all the way back, is probably from 3, 4, 5 years old.
Yeah.
My dad was quite physically abusive. And so in that time I would have felt, I'm sure as a 3, 4, 5-year-old which was getting physically abusive, or the learned behaviour was to be tough.
Yeah.
You know, I would have felt at that age a lot of fear,
Yeah.
a lot of anxiety,
Yeah.
a lot of powerlessness, because what could I do at 3, 4, 5 years old?
Not a
So
lot.
I learned to disconnect from that age to survive that environment.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that served the way for me to adapt, and didn't serve me very well, because then when I was out in the world and out in other environments, and any form of anxiety, fear or powerless come up, or I was getting dominated, it was shut down. I'm not being dominated. I'm not going to feel powerless. Get away from it.
Yeah.
And try to control and dominate the situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which doesn't serve you well as you go along.
No,
in your life. And
no, it doesn't.
So then for me, then it was actually learning to reconnect back emotionally, and actually it's okay to feel anxious, it's okay to feel fearful at times, and feel powerless, because the thing is, what I've learned about, especially if we're talking about, if I use the emotional vulnerability of feeling powerless, one thing that I learned is that I'm never powerless.
No.
Because I've got the power to make it worse. You know,
Power to make it worse.
so if I'm feeling powerless, and instead of getting caught up in the behaviours, it's just to recognise that it's okay to, I just feel a little bit powerless here right now. But I'm not,
I see what you mean.
But I'm not completely powerless.
No,
because I've got the power to make this situation a whole lot worse, which I don't want to do.
No.
But in good terms in that. But then if I've got the power to make it worse, I haven't got the power to make it any worse, or maybe just a little bit better.
Yes.
So it's just taking that way of feeling powerless. Actually, I'm not completely powerless, you know, and just and then learning different coping mechanisms, tools and techniques of how just to sit with it. But actually, I think I've said in the last podcast, actually, I needed to learn to grow my emotional muscle, because from a young age of disconnecting, my emotional muscle would have been like a peanut. As soon as I felt powerless or anxious or fearful, come straight away from that into my mind, because we can't feel vulnerability in our mind, but it can distort the situation.
Absolutely.
But I had to learn then to sit, breathe, do you mean relax into it, recognise it, acknowledge it, accept it, and start to grow my emotional muscle. So when I'm in these situations of vulnerability, I can actually be with it. Yeah. Still uncomfortable, but it's bearable.
Yeah. That's your phrase. It's bearable.
Yeah. Is it uncomfortable?
Yeah.
Yes, but it's bearable. And if it's bearable, it means I can be with it.
Absolutely. Because I think, we can bear quite a lot, can't we, as human beings? And the bearing with something can actually lead us through it.
Yeah. But is it manageable?
Yeah.
And things are manageable.
Absolutely. Because all emotion will be temporary, won't it? It won't last forever, whether that's joy or sadness or anything. Right. It will be temporary. So can we bear it for that period while we're experiencing it until it passes, and then something else will replace it?
And it takes time, and it takes practice with different, from what I've learned of learning tools and techniques and strategies. But it takes time. Yeah. To do that, and it takes practice. Yeah. But it can be achieved.
It can be. Clearly,
it can be, yeah.
I don't know where we'd be, and I don't know how we'd help other people, would we? So we thought about how we might disconnect and why we might do that, and I think the essence of that is about to avoid something that's unpleasant, and or because the environment told us we should disconnect. So that's kind of why we do it, isn't it? Almost like so often it's like a survival strategy in our early life, isn't it? Yeah. And then we kind of moved on a little bit to think about how we disconnect, and sometimes it is that, take a deep breath, swallow it down, or find some kind of substances or behaviour to disconnect from it, isn't it? I wonder if we need to say a bit more about that. We touched briefly on addiction, didn't we?
Well, as I say, if I take it back to going back to childhood, how people can adapt to that environment. Well, adapt and survive that environment. Fundamentally, they're trying to escape from that. So some people have said before, and I think I've talked to you before about people can light fires.
Yeah.
You think fires, that might be a strain, but when you think about it, actually the fire brings first and fundamentally some warmth. Maybe the warmth that we wanting and getting in our environment, in our homes.
Yeah.
So actually seeing that fire and that warmth, that it's just a metaphor for the warmth that we was getting.
Yeah.
Secondly, can you imagine you can just zone out into the flames and take yourself into another world?
Yeah.
It's just all a form of escapism.
Yeah.
So that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think it's self-explanatory why some people may run away from home.
Yeah.
Because they just don't want to be in that.
I want to be there, yeah.
Right? And maybe a little bit, if I talked a little about myself, from my own experiences, another way to do it is to become more volatile and more aggressive. It's just another way of getting away from this sense of vulnerability, etc. So there's many ways that we can do it. I don't know if you.
It sounds like you're thinking of addiction as being like an escape from something that's.
It's escape from the vulnerability.
Yeah.
From my experiences, because it'd be the same thing again. When there's a difficulty that comes up in our life, and we might feel lonely, we might feel rejected. We've learned not to feel that. And if we've done that over a lot of time, we just don't want to feel that.
No. So it's an escape from the pain.
It's an escape from the pain and the vulnerability.
I think I kind of agree with that. I'm thinking, being an addict in recovery, my addiction being workaholism. It was definitely that work kind of came in, and it didn't take away, of course, because it doesn't, does it? But what it did is mask I think the feeling it masked mainly was like loneliness and isolation, which again links back to childhood, having a mother who wasn't available and a very dysfunctional family to grow up in. There was no real connection. No. There's nothing there really to meet that need that I would have had as a child for connection, for nurturing, for warmth, that kind of thing that children need. And so what I did probably quite early on, I think maybe early 20s, was develop, because I didn't set out, consciously thinking, well, I'm going to become a workaholic, because that will stop me feeling. I think it was just very gradual, I suppose most addictions are, It starts with the first glass of wine after work, doesn't it? Or the first. I remember I thought I was lonely one Saturday, and I thought, what I'll do is I'll go into the office and I'll do the accounts. And I did, might be quite a sensible thing for some people, just go and do the accounts on a Saturday if you had a spare day. But actually, it was the very beginning of an addiction that just spiraled out of control, so that I didn't do anything other than work. And it was just overwhelming my life, and of course it made me ill and I burnt out. But I know now that workaholism was about removing that uncomfortable feeling and experience of being lonely and disconnected.
So it's going back to what I said about that escape.
The escape, absolutely.
The escape.
Absolutely, It provided me with another world I could go to avoid what I was feeling.
And that's what I'm saying. It does. We all choose our own form of doing it, doesn't it? So it takes us into another world. Yeah. Even looking at a fire, you can go into another world and visualise and daydream, etc. Play and what's boxes in place. You're getting taken into another world. So, and obviously drugs, you can definitely get taken into another world. Yeah. So it's all that removing yourself from reality in those moments.
Absolutely, yeah. And any of the addictions can do that, can't they? They can kind of take us away from or take us into a different state of consciousness. I'm thinking if you're on drugs or drink, perhaps, or sex, any of those things, they can take you away, can't they? And create an escape and an entry into a different reality, which is, it seems preferable to the reality, but it isn't really, is it? No, because it will cause problems.
Because when you get any of the high that you've got, be it from the fire to the games to the sex to the drugs, there's always the aftermath, which in turn you're still going to feel vulnerable when that subsides.
Exactly.
Then obviously you go back again.
Go and do it again.
And I think that's what I've said before. It's you're going to feel vulnerable anyway. So it's about learning then to, I may as well be my authentic self and be with the original vulnerability and get through that. It's a little bit like, as you know, that I work around domestic violence and abuse, and it's similar to that. It's like when we talk about some of their behaviours, it's so when you've done some of the behaviours, what did you feel? Well, I felt guilty and I felt sad. So you felt vulnerable. So you felt vulnerable with the behaviours you've done. But what started the behaviours? I felt vulnerable. So you might as well be with the authentic, original vulnerability,
absolutely,
which is going to be more healthy and serve you. We go back to the word serving you better.
Because people don't know that.
No, they don't.
When I'm working with somebody who comes to me with some kind of addiction, like one of the first questions I want to find out is, okay, when did you first start to use, if it's drink or drugs or whatever, sex or porn addiction, whatever it is, when's the first time you remember using the whatever? And then usually that will take them to some very young age, maybe childhood, teenage years, often teenage years, because that's when we've got the kind of the freedom and the autonomy to be able to access things, isn't it? More so than when we're 7 or something. So often it will go back to some kind of teenage time. And then it's like, okay, and what need were you trying to meet in that moment? And often it's to escape, it's vulnerability, it's pain. And so what we then begin to do is to build that relationship with that teenage part that was just basically trying to find some escape from something that was intolerable. And it's not, I'm making it sound very easy, aren't I? I mean, that can take a long time to get to that.
But like I said just now, it takes a lot of time, patience and practice.
Yeah, it can do.
Because we built up all these coping mechanisms or disconnections. So that's become a pattern of behaviour. It's become an autopilot subconscious. So we need to learn these new tools and techniques and practices for that to become integrate that as part, and that takes time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's not like we're never ever going to have another negative thought in our life, or we're never going to feel any emotions in our life. It's you are, but it's about the awareness, which I know, which was one of your mantras that you like, is because that awareness will bring a choice. And the choice which will bring the change.
It may well do, Perhaps I should explain that. So my mantra, isn't it, is that if we have awareness of something, we might then have a choice, and we might choose to change behaviour, thoughts, whatever, ways of life, ways of being. But without the awareness, there's no choice. That's right. And then if there's no choice, there's not going to be a change. Just to give context to that.
Good. I think it's good to clear that up. But it's like I say to people as well, it's if I'm working as well, especially around the domestic abuse side of things, I say this is no magic pill. It's there's no magic wand, no magic pill. This is a practice. This is a daily practice for the rest of your life. Because if you don't use this new awareness or understanding, or especially these new tools and techniques, what have you got to draw back on? Just what you've done before. Because you don't know anything else.
No.
So you need to stay awake, stay aware, and in that moment you can choose to stay with the new tools and techniques.
Absolutely. So we went off on a bit of a tangent there around addiction, didn't we? But I just thought it was important because I think everyone's addicted to something. Not everyone's an alcoholic or a workaholic or a drug addict or whatever, but everyone has something that they default to help them disconnect from emotion. It could be food, couldn't it? It could be gardening, it could be the gym, but we all have that something that we use to disconnect from emotion that's difficult because it's soothing or it's preferable to the distress of the actual unpleasant emotion we might be otherwise left with. So I think it's fair to say, okay, we may not all say we're addicts, but we're all certainly able to access something that would help us to feel better if we're not feeling so good.
Definitely.
You agree with that?
I agree with it. And it's about then getting to understand ourselves, exploring ourselves, what's really going on for us, what's our authentic self. And it's okay then to still have an escapism. If that escapism is healthy for us.
Yes, exactly.
Not,
And if any of the escapisms that we might discover, if they basically are about us not feeling something, it's not going to be healthy long term, is it?
No.
It's not. And that emotion doesn't go, does it? It doesn't disappear.
No.
When we swallow down those tears, they don't disappear. That energy that is contained within that emotion just goes down within us. And one of the counselling approaches that I were trained in and teach, Gestalt, is very interested in the link between suppressed emotion and health, which is why I was saying earlier it can cause physical distress. So any of those escapes, they serve us in the short term, in the moment, but long term they cause massive damage. So we've got to connect, haven't we? We've got to plug back into the emotion.
And that can lead us on to and how can we reconnect?
Well, how can we? We've got some ideas.
Well, I suppose it's about having a different relationship with our emotions. And for me, and how I discuss it and talk about it is, and a little bit like reparenting ourselves. But if we just talk at this minute in time about having a different relationship with our emotions, and going back to what you said, just starting to just let ourselves know that they're all natural, they're all okay. It doesn't matter what's coming. It's natural and it's needed. And another way that I like to look at it now is just getting back to our how we can have a different relationship with our emotions. It's just letting yourself know the emotions. Well, we're meant to feel emotions. If we weren't meant to feel them, they wouldn't be there.
Exactly.
So just see them as a guide.
Yeah.
Because how I explain it as well, you even go back to Neanderthal days or caveman days, they needed to feel fear at some time if they were hunting a woolly mammoth or a saber-toothed tiger, because they need to know, right, in this moment that fear was letting them know, do I need to get out of here or do I need to stand my ground and fight? It was, the fear was letting you know what you need to do. And it's the same as the modern day. And if I take relationships or the death, if a death unfortunately occurs, which it will do.
It will happen,
It will happen. Like the end of a relationship and a death are pretty similar.
Yeah.
They're the end of something, which is going to bring up emotional vulnerability, lots of emotion. But if I just name a few of some loneliness, some isolation, some disappointment, some hurt, some pain, sadness. But once again, if you can just let yourself know in that moment, actually, it's just a guide, because that loneliness and isolation will let you know, you need to grieve right now, and that grieving is going to help you heal. So once again, all the emotions are a guide. Just let you know, okay, so I'm feeling this. What's the message? What am I? What's this trying to help me with here? What do I need to do?
Absolutely. A friend, she's died too now, but some years ago her husband died, and of course they'd been together like 50 years, and he died very very unexpectedly. And she went to the doctor because she was so unfamiliar with feeling this intensity of grief, and like literally the doctor put her on antidepressants, and it's like, well, she wasn't depressed, she was grieving.
That's right.
The severity of this emotion was overwhelming for her, but I think if she'd been able to stay with that,
express it,
then go through it, maybe if the doctor had kind of helped her to understand that, and kind of normalised it, told her perhaps what she might expect, maybe that would have actually served her better than antidepressants, which
I think so, because it was natural. She needed to
grieve for her husband of 50 odd years,
which was going to support her to heal, not
Exactly.
to forget, not to feel anything, just to diminish it, just to support her and help her.
Exactly. And I'm not knocking antidepressants if people need them. I'm not saying that, but really, was she depressed or was she grieving? Is my point in that, Yeah.
But just one point that to come back to as well is, like, some of them say, but sometimes the emotions are too overwhelming. But I'd just like to explore into that and question that and say, for me, actually, the emotions, if we're going back to emotions, are natural. It's not the emotion that's overwhelming. It's about, that's part of the disconnection and going to our mind again. It's the mind that makes it feel overwhelming.
Absolutely.
Because let's go back to the end of a relationship or death again. Not saying everybody, but this is where it can get to. Some people can say, I can't live anymore. How can I live without them? I can't move on. I can't get on in life. That is what's making it start to go to some
mind's interpretation,
which starts to make it feel overwhelming. But if we actually start just to see it as a guide, having that different relationship, actually, no, I'm meant to feel this. This is natural.
It's normal.
Just to accept and acknowledge.
Absolutely.
Actually, because what we said before, it will come in waves. Not that it will just go away. But what you'll probably find after a little while, a few minutes, maybe a little bit more, actually it'll subside. It will come back again.
Of course, like waves, isn't it? Though?
It'll come back, like a roller coaster waves, whatever analogy you work, it will come back and forth, but it'll feel more soothing, more calming to be with it. It's the mind that will distort into a sense of being too overwhelming.
Absolutely. Such a good point, isn't it? Because the emotional experience itself, even if it's really intense, will probably be bearable, to use your phrase, because actually we are designed as human beings to be able to bear emotion. Of course we're designed to do that. But the mind will come in, won't it, and say, this is awful, this is terrible, have a drink, go out, do something, go to work, whatever this is bad. Mind, it will judge it and tell us to do something to avoid it, won't it? Whereas actually the actual emotional experience of something will just pass.
It will pass.
I don't think anybody died of emotion.
No.
Do you?
No. Well, I'm not too sure about it. No. But no.
Like as a they died of. I know there's this talk, isn't there, that people die of heartbreak or something. But I don't think anybody, and I'm not including suicide in this, but I don't think people die of feeling sad or lonely. They're things that can pass.
Not exactly. I think if we learn to actually be with our emotions, I don't think anyone's going to die from that.
No.
As I said, I think we can talk ourselves into things.
Yes, so the mind might say, this is terrible, get out.
Terrible, get out, do this, or do that, or take this route, take that route, or this is too overwhelming, it's too much. But actually, if we
just the emotion.
I think it's the Fritz Perls, is it? Just lose the mind and just
come to your senses.
Just come to your senses and just be with the emotional sense of things. It will be bearable. It will be bearable.
It will, yeah. Even though sometimes it might feel really hard to bear, it still is bearable. Otherwise, we wouldn't feel it. You know, the human system is not going to destroy itself, is it?
No. And that's when you need to bring. We're talking about connection here and being authentic, and this is when you bring the heart in, because what you need to be with yourself in those moments is compassionate to yourself.
Yeah.
You know, actually, this is understandable.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is natural. It's understandable you're feeling this way.
Yeah.
Because you care.
Yeah.
But you'll be okay.
Yes.
It just take time.
Yeah.
You know? But you need to be compassionate, and this is a big thing as well. We talked about relationship before. This is a big thing. If you can't be with your own emotions in difficulty, it's going to be very hard for you to be with other people's emotions in difficulty.
Impossible, I would say.
And if you can't be with yourself compassionately in difficulty, it's going to be very difficult or impossible to be compassionate for somebody else in that moment.
Absolutely.
And the thing is, our internal dialogue is going to end up being our external dialogue.
Yeah.
So if I was talking to myself thinking, no, I'm not happy about this isn't right, you know, this I'm not taking this, or etc., or can be. That's how I'm probably going to externalise my communication.
Yeah.
You know, because I'm trying to get away from my emotional vulnerability. You know, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
You know? But if I'm saying to myself, no, it's just this individual. You know, it's okay to feel a little bit rejected here, a little bit sad, a little bit powerless, whatever it is, and you can get through this. You know what I mean? And it's understandable. It's just you care. If my internal dialogue's like that, I'm more likely to vocabulate that out and communicate that out.
Yeah.
So it's about getting our inner sense and inner peace to ourselves with it.
So it sounds like you and I think I have too, we've learned to reconnect to our emotion. You know, you speak, I think with a lot of personal experience that's influenced your understanding of this.
Yeah, and a lot of work.
A lot of work too, a lot of therapy.
A lot of therapy and a lot of work.
Therapy and work. So we kind of haven't we, taken that, I guess, brave step to kind of reconnect to emotion, haven't we?
Yeah.
I'm aware for other people who might be watching or listening to this, it might be a bit overwhelming or even a new idea, mightn't it? So I'm just thinking, like, how could we help someone who perhaps has not until hearing this even thought they might be disconnected from their emotion? Just thinking, like, you know, what kind of, you know, top 2 tips or something could we give them that might help them to kind of just begin that plugging back in and connecting again?
Well, before I say that, because what you're saying, people might be listening, thinking, "Oh yeah, well that all sounds easy." It's not easy.
It's not. No.
It's not easy to reconnect because it takes an intention, a commitment, and responsibility to you, and a will and a want.
Yeah.
You know, that's the fundamental first thing. You got an intention, a commitment, and want to reconnect.
Yeah, absolutely.
To yourself. So that's the first point.
That's a really good one. Yeah.
And take responsibility within that.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's the first point. I
think it's really good, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then maybe, you know, if I did a second one, it would be something about, you know, take it very gently. So just, you know, don't try and summons up the most horrendous feeling you've ever tried not to feel. But, you know, just like, how do you feel in this moment? You know, just sitting for just a moment with a cup of tea or something. How do I feel right now?
Just that inquiry.
Yeah, kind of like that self-inquiry, you know, like, I don't know, maybe I'm feeling calm as I have my cup of tea. And okay, so where in the body do you feel that calmness? You know, maybe it's in the stomach or the chest, or maybe your shoulders relax. So just getting a sense of that feeling and how it feels in the body. You know, just to gently begin reconnecting to an emotional experience of something. Yeah,
and I think it goes back to what I said earlier. This, you know, it's a practice.
Yes,
and it takes time.
Yeah,
you know,
so you might do that a few times.
Or many times.
I was being optimistic.
Yeah, like I said to myself, this is even for myself now. It's a daily practice. If I don't stay awake and aware to myself and bring the tools and techniques that support me within that, I will just go back to old patterns because that's the only 2 things I know.
That's it. Yeah, we default, don't we, to what's most familiar.
Default,
yeah. We don't consciously choose that. We just do it. You know, we're great defaulters, aren't we? Human beings. We default to what's familiar.
But it goes back to the thing of trying to stay aware, because as soon as I'm aware of what's going on, then I have a choice. Do I continue what serves me and etc. and the new tools and techniques which is going to be more healthy.
Yeah.
Because if I don't, the only other choice is, what's the alternative? Go back to the old patterns of behaviour.
Do what's familiar, but probably not so helpful.
Yeah.
So that would be our kind of recommendations, wouldn't it? To kind of begin reconnecting.
Yeah.
And of course, the benefits of reconnecting are we're having a more authentic experience of ourselves and our lives, because as we said, we are human beings, and as human beings we are designed to feel. I'm just trying to think if we could kind of like talk a bit more about the other benefits of reconnecting. Yeah, so I guess...
Well, I suppose what this podcast's all about, the first benefit is going to be about, this is who you truly are. This is what's really happening for you. This is your authentic self.
Yeah.
Like, because I talked to people as well, because once you disconnect from the emotion and you go to a default coping mechanism, that could be withdrawing, sulking. It could be being more volatile or aggressive, and people then just see, oh, they're a bit aggressive and a bit volatile, but actually that's not who you truly are.
No.
So the benefit for one is going to be that you're going to be your authentic self, and people can see that authentic self. Just come to me now. Another benefit is actually, the more you practice it, it's a lot more calming.
It is, and
a lot more relaxing.
And
that's what I found personally and professionally working with the people. They say, well, actually, that felt more relieving to actually be with my vulnerability, because actually to escape and you'll get into default and actually it can become quite irate and quite stressful, and heart starts pumping and all these other bodily things, and actually it's quite a stressful thing to escape at times.
It can be, Well, if you're using an addiction to escape, it's stressful, isn't it? Because where you're going to get your next whatever, drink, fix, whatever, it can be very stressful. Even if your default is to get resentful, to blame, to get volatile, that just cost your relationships.
So your relationship for one, and your health, because your blood pressure goes up, etc. But going back to relationships, we're talking about risks and benefits. One of the risks are, if you default all the time and you're having unhealthy default coping mechanism, it's not going to support your relationship. It's not going to support you or your relationships. No. So the benefit on top of that, if you start reconnecting with who you truly are and what's going on, and communicate from, actually, you know what, right now I'm just feeling lonely, and I'm feeling sad, and I'm feeling some rejection, I'd like to reconnect with you again. It's only going to benefit your relationship.
Absolutely.
Because the other person's going to know what's happening for you, actually how much you care, and how you're communicating. So there's a big risk and benefits to your relationship wise.
Absolutely. I mean, you've nicked my two. I was going to say about improved health potentially, and also improvement to relationships. I think it's probably going to be virtually impossible for people to enjoy a happy adult relationship if they can't feel emotion. Didn't you think? I mean, I'm not saying people couldn't have long, unhappy marriages, but actually to be together, I'm thinking romantic relationships, to be together for a long term, you'd have to be able to feel what you feel and to be able to communicate that. Otherwise, it's almost like, think back to a previous podcast, it's about, two people wearing a suit of armour, disconnected from themselves and from each other.
Another thing that reminds me of is actually, if you're not having an intimate relationship from actually your authentic self and actually from your heart and from your emotions, all you're going to end up with is a superficial relationship. Because everything's the same surface level. Oh, where are we going tonight? Are we going to go to a restaurant? What holiday are we having? What new car are we going to buy? Everything will be superficial. Actually, if you want a real, true, deep, connected, bonded relationship, it needs to be from authenticity and vulnerability.
Absolutely. I totally agree.
And to get to know each other from that point of view.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And I'm just thinking for people who perhaps haven't listened to the previous podcast, by intimate, we're talking about not necessarily romantic relationships, although we are right now, but we talk about any relationship, aren't we? Do we want that superficial, how are you? I'm fine, thanks, bye type conversation, or do we want to enter into a deeper level of communicating with people and connecting? That
intimacy, as we said, you just summed it up then, but it's not just about the intimate partnership relationship or actually even a physical relationship. It's actually the verbal and communication is a lot of intimacy in there, and that could be with your partner, it could be with your children, it could be with friends, it could be with family, it could be with anybody. I think you've mentioned before, it could be with your neighbour, it
could be anyone,
it could be anybody. If you're actually communicating from your own sense of self and vulnerability, and like I think I mentioned before, it's actually what brings that connection, because people cannot just hear you, they can feel you.
Absolutely.
And that brings a bond and a connection.
I don't know if you've, maybe a slightly aside, but if you come across that idea where people are like really outspoken, people admire it, and they kind of like really like it. You know, people are really outspoken and just say it as it is. Actually, people kind of quite like that. And I think that's kind of like because of what you're saying, that people can feel that it's genuine.
It's genuine, yeah.
You know, it's like, okay, it's a bit hard hitting, it's a bit bold, but at least I know where that person stands and where they're coming from and what they want, don't want. It's kind of clear, isn't it? Compared to somebody who might be, for example, still living out a coping strategy of people pleasing, and it's like, you know, where do you want to go? Well, wherever you want, I don't mind. It's really hard to get to connect to that person, isn't it?
But in my terms of the intimacy level, because we can tell somebody what we're wanting, but it can be just from a mind level, an intellectual level. This is how I'd like to do things to me. I'm not happy about this, and I'm really disappointed about this, and I'm really sad about it. Well, I can't feel any. I can't feel any sadness or disappointment. I'm actually maybe directive. But actually, the intimate level that I'm talking about is a lot more softer, a lot more slower, and a lot more connected. Actually, I'm just very sad, disappointed, and I'm not happy about this.
Absolutely.
And I'd like to reconnect with you again. There's a difference.
There is.
Two ways. You're saying the same thing, two different ways.
Two very different ways.
One, they can hear it. And second, they can feel it.
Exactly.
You know?
I love that. Yeah. Say that again. One, they can hear it.
One, they can hear it, but the other way they can feel it.
Yeah. And it has to be the feeling, doesn't it? Because just the hearing it could, to use my analogy, straight back into the wardrobe to get that suit of armour on to protect themselves from being hurt. And then, of course, it's really hard to be authentic or in relationship when you're wearing a heavy suit of armour. Yeah.
So I think it's great to actually be directive and speak what's happening, but not to speak what we're thinking. Speak what we're feeling.
And in the feeling, there's a need, isn't there? Something. This is another benefit of reconnecting to emotion. Then we might become aware of the need. Like I'm thinking, you know, with my workaholism, if I'd known in that moment actually what I'm feeling is lonely, then I would have known there's a need for connection to people, which was not going to be met by going into the office to do accounts on a Saturday when I was the only person in the office. Do you see what I mean? So it's like by noticing what the feeling is, we might also notice the need. And then in the need, it's like, okay, so what I need to do is go and meet people, not go to work. I might have got addicted to meeting people, mightn't I?
Go and socialise.
Exactly, which probably would have been a bit healthier. So it's another benefit, isn't it? It's like noticing the emotion. It can help us also to identify the need in that moment. I'm thinking like your thing about like romantic relationships and feel it and all of that. I'm thinking how much probably more helpful it would be to say to a partner, I'm feeling lonely right now, I need a hug. As opposed to like, you're always watching the TV, you've got no time for me. And very different, isn't it?
Very different. Well, that's what people get. There's we're talking about relationships. For my terms, there's two ways to communicate. There's getting caught up in the desired love or the compassionate love. You know, the desired love is all about you're not meeting my needs, and the compassionate love is just about you care for the other person's well-being. You know, which they can integrate. But you need to have a foundation coming from a compassionate love and the desired love on top.
Absolutely.
Not the other way around. And that's why, like we've mentioned before, it's like divorce rates and separation rates is 50% of the time. You take most conversation, or let's not call them conversation, most arguments against couples, they all go out, well, you don't do this for me, you don't do that, and can you see your behaviour? Well, really, can you see your behaviour? You don't do this. Well, where are they coming from? They're actually just coming from, you're not meeting my needs. Actually, what's going on below that? Actually, what I was saying just now, actually, if there's been a bit of discord in the relationship, actually, I'm feeling a little bit lonely, a little bit isolated, a little bit rejected, a little bit sad. I need to reconnect. Now, actually, if we just went back to them and saying, listen, we haven't really been speaking for the last few days, I'm feeling a bit lonely, feeling a little bit isolated, I'd like to reconnect you. What would you...
I mean, it feels so different.
And actually, if I'm feeling vulnerable, I'm sure that you're feeling vulnerable too. So it's about that inclusive conversation. But people generally don't divorce rates are telling you that.
Yes, yeah,
it's
it's
just
not
getting
common,
back
is it?
into you're not meeting my needs, but what's actually going on
Yeah.
is what's below. That's getting back to the authentic self again. Actually, I'm just sad and I'm lonely and I want to reconnect with you.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So, I mean, it's probably the theme for another podcast about, how to have, kind of better romantic relationships. But all of this, the way you're talking about relating to one another now, links to having some kind of emotional connection, because otherwise you wouldn't even know what it is you're feeling or wanting or needing.
No. And that's why the escapism, again, is feeling lonely or rejected or sad within a relationship. That's another default coping mechanism, is because you're trying to come away from it into your mind, like we talked about before, which is distorting it and thinking negative. Well, they don't care for me anymore, they don't love me anymore, or catastrophize, what's the point of this relationship, it's over. But that's all a way of coming away from what you really feel. Because when you do that again, hold on, what's happening here? Why I've gone to mind again? What's below this?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's how it starts to reconnect.
What is that emotion really? And
what's really going on for me?
Because you said earlier, that emotion, it could well be alerting us to the fact we need something. And
in that moment, I would say just what we're talking about there. I need to reconnect with my partner.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Because I'm sad.
Yeah.
I'm feeling sad and I'm feeling lonely.
Yeah.
Because I need connection.
Absolutely. I mean, these days anxiety has such a bad press, doesn't it? It feels like everyone's anxious and everyone's rushing off to get some kind of anxiety treatment. But what if anxiety is actually just a messenger that's alerting us to something not being right?
Yeah.
It may not tell us what exactly is not right, but then with some self-inquiry we could find out, couldn't we? Okay, I'm feeling anxious, and let me look at that. What is that anxiety trying to tell me? What's it trying to alert me to? So if we think of feelings like, these emotions as messengers, then maybe they're a bit less scary. If I'm feeling sad, okay, that's just a message from my emotions that say I just need to stop for a minute and perhaps have a cry. And then carry on in half an hour. It's just a messenger, isn't it? It's just telling me something I need to do.
It's a bit like you're saying the word messenger. You like the word messenger, I like the word guy. They're both exactly the same
thing.
Same thing, the way you do it. And I think we was having a conversation earlier, and also how to reconnect and feeling vulnerable sometimes. And we go back to when I'm having conversations and we would say, I was disappointed and I was sad. And okay, so what was the reason that you were sad and disappointed with that? Well, it's because you care. It's just another way in. It's just to realise that actually you just care. And just another way to help yourself to be with it.
So if we choose to stay disconnected from our emotion forever, we're almost denying ourselves a really valuable resource, aren't we? Not only health and relationships, but a resource, as part of our inbuilt natural system that can kind of alert us to something that needs changing, or something that we need to add to our life, or a change of direction. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's cutting off a really valuable guidance system. It's like driving somewhere unfamiliar and purposely turning off the sat-nav as you start the journey, isn't it?
Well, that's right.
It's easier if you turn it on.
And I know we've mentioned that phrase before from Fritz Perls about lose your mind and come your senses, because if you take us all the way back to birth, we were born with this. We were born with this capacity and this energy and this emotional and all this guidance, etc., and connection to our soul, our heart, our emotions. But as we're going back to, our life experiences and our life difficulties stops us, chips away at that. And then we need to start disconnecting to protect ourselves and to adapt and survive. But then it's about getting into adulthood now. It's about then, okay, let's look at this, let's explore this.
Indeed. Thanks, Lee. It's a great conversation.
Cheers, Mark.
And for anyone who's watching or listening to this, you can follow or subscribe, depending on the platform you're watching us on. And don't miss an episode. So we'll see you on the next one. We appreciate you taking the time to listen to us today. If anything you have heard has resonated with you, you would like to explore more, or have found difficult, you can get in touch with us. Our details are in the show notes below, along with some other useful links.